Britain in the 90s had some great number one singles. Songs that summed up a moment, stretched the boundaries of what pop could be, yet have stood the test of time. Nothing Compares to You, Don't Look Back in Anger, Wannabe, Firestarter, Baby One More Time. From this list, you would think that the British record buying public had excellent, undeniable taste. But then there are other songs where you wonder, how did that become the most popular song in the country? Whether that's because it's a confusing mishmash of genres, defiantly uncommercial, or offensively not very good. This is an exploration of those songs. The stories of the most bizarre UK number ones of the 1990s. Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini was written in 1959, inspired by his 2-year-old daughter's hesitance to try on her first swimsuit. Paul Vance, alongside songwriting partner Lee Pockris, dreamt up a rock and roll novelty based on the very European, midriff-exposing beachwear.
It was an itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini.
Given to up-and-coming crooner Brian Hyland, it was a global hit and helped the formerly prudish US fall in love with the bikini.
Afraid that somebody would say,
2, 3, 4, tell the people what she wore.
In the UK, the song only reached number 8. It would take 30 years, a kids' TV presenter and the composer of the West End musical Phantom of the Opera, to take it to the top.
it was an itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini.
It all started off as a bet. Andrew Lloyd Webber's wife, Madeline, felt that while he'd had ample success on the stage, he could never produce a summer pop hit. Taking this personally, he vowed to prove her wrong. The flamboyantly dressed and bespectacled Timmy Mallett had introduced himself to Britain's children in the 80s as presenter of ITV's Saturday morning kids shows, Wide Awake Club and Wackaday. His trademark brand of wackiness involved catchphrases like utterly brilliant and blurg, and most importantly, Pinky Punky, a soft foam hammer with which he'd bonked child contestants on the head after they failed word association questions. By 1990, he was beloved by the nation's youth, and so was deemed a suitable choice to front the Brian Hyland cover and Lloyd Webber's secret campaign for chart glory. But to give a wink to who was really in charge behind the scenes, it was released under the name Bomb Ballerina, one of the cats from Cats. It took only 2 days between the two men's initial meeting and getting into the studio. The track reimagined from rock and roll confection to the maximalist pop house of the day.
Was afraid that somebody would see.
2, 3, 4, tell the people what she wore.
Complete with sampled interjections from Run DMC.
How y'all feel out there?
Oh yeah.
Go on, girl. Go on, go on, go on, girl.
Oh yeah.
Go on, girl. Go on, go on, go on.
Their chart ascent was aided by a shonky video showing the titular adjective-stacked bikini on an adult woman, as well as a timely headline in The Sun, Princess Diana being papped in the aforementioned swimwear, besides the words, Itsy Bitsy dies a dream in her bikini.
1, 2, 3, 4.
It hit number 1 in the last week of July 1990, denying the DNA remix of Suzanne Vega's Tom's Diner. But whether Mallett actually sang on the song is up for debate. One of the group's backing singers, Everton Barnes, claimed that he was the voice on the track.
She was afraid to come out in the open.
The producers decided Timmy was perfect to do the vocals, as he was all the rage. But when they got him into the studio, his voice was as flat as a pancake. I sang the whole vocal track, and Timmy's was shunted into the background. Heavy metal has rarely had pop crossover appeal. While its fanbase is devoted and loyal, the likes of Judas Priest and pre-Black Album Metallica never got much play on BBC Radio 1. As such, metal bands found it hard to get more than a token chart hit.
Think I'll lose my mind if I don't find something to fight. Living after midnight, rocking to the dawn. The only gun I need is the ace of spades, the ace of spades. Darkness imprisoning me, all that I see
Iron Maiden were an exception. Since Run to the Hills in February 1982, their first single with Air Raid Siren vocalist Bruce Dickinson, 13 of their singles had gone top 20. So on Christmas Eve 1990, they released Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter, their second single from the No Prayer for the Dying album. It had been written in about 3 minutes as a Dickinson solo track for the 1989 horror film A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. It was a schlocky ode to the fear of female sexual awakening, with some suitably one-note single entendres. Though Dickinson's version would win the Razzie for Worst Original Song in 1990, Maiden bassist Steve Harris was impressed, and the band re-recorded it for their next album. How we got to number 1 was conscious chart strategy. The week after Christmas is typically light on new releases, so the band issuing the single on Christmas Eve took advantage of the relative lack of competition. While the faithful would buy anything Maiden put out, a combination of multiple different single formats, and acting as counter-programming to the Christ-themed current number 1, Saviour's Day by Cliff Richard, drove sales. The fact that Radio 1 banned the single from airplay helped further, adding a curiosity for the forbidden. And even when it did get to the top spot, Top of the Pops censored their horror film-themed music video.
They showed 1 minute 10 seconds of it or something, which the song is about 3.5 minutes long, so you'd think that they could show a bit more of it. There's some black and white bits from an old Hammer horror movie we put in there, showing a woman being sort of like taken to the slaughter, and all the rest of it, But the BBC, thought that it was obviously, too much cowabunga going on for the, for the viewers on Top of the Pops, so they decided to edit it themselves. And then everybody else on telly did a sort of knee-jerk reaction. Bring Your Daughter would remain at number 1 for 2 weeks, the nation's first metal number 1. It wouldn't happen again for another decade. By 1990, Romanian-born Michael Cretu had quietly made himself an important part of Europop. He'd played keyboards on Boney M's Rivers of Babylon, and he'd produced hits for his mononymic German pop-star partner, Sandra. In 1987, they bagged a top 5 single in Greece, West Germany and Switzerland, with Sandra's version of Everlasting Love. Its intro, a cathedral reverb chant of the title phrase, would point towards their future, but also the past. Sandra's keyboardist, Frank Peterson, had been interested in the idea of combining centuries-old Gregorian chants with dance pop ever since he'd seen the Sean Connery starring medieval actioner, The Name of the Rose. To maintain secrecy about their identity and avoid preconceptions, they together launched a new dance project as Enigma, and used pseudonyms like Curly MC and F. Gregorian. On their first single, Sadness Part 1, they mixed together sampled Gregorian chant, synthesized flute, and the soul-to-soul shuffle beat as the bass for a dance track. Topped off with breathy exertions, and Sandra whispering in French references to 18th century author, the Marquis de Sade. It was the religious intermingling with the carnal, medieval but modern, and listeners couldn't get enough. Released by Virgin in October 1990, before they even made a video for the track,
With just radio and club play alone, Sadness went to number 1 in Germany, faster than any other in their chart's history. By the time it hit the UK, the song was infamous. The Vatican had decried the track as blasphemous for its randy use of monk chanting, and banned it from all their affiliated radio stations, which of course made people want to hear it more. People don't understand that this song isn't a joke. Gregorian chants are the base of classical music as we know it. It was Pope Gregor I in the 6th century who said it was okay to play music. It started a wave of other producers attempting their own medieval-themed house. But by 1983, Enigma had moved on, with the return of innocence replacing 6th century chanting for ethnic yodeling. Mr. Blobby is an entirely British phenomenon. A 7-foot, pear-shaped, pink and yellow foam rubber covered agent of chaos, designed to be the stupidest, most irritating thing ever. Naked apart from a bow tie, with a fixed smile, aimless eyes, and an electronically altered voice that made him sound like a hell demon, even though the only thing he could say was his own surname. He was invented by producer Michael Lego for a prank segment on the BBC's 1990s Saturday night TV show Noel's House Party. The setup consisted of various celebrities getting convinced that Blobby was a real kids mascot. Then they tried to teach the non-existent kids at home skills like rugby, dance and soccer, as the Blobby one tried his best to annoy his co-host and smash the set. The gotcha was when House Party host Noel Edmonds revealed himself to be in the suit. Swearing and embarrassment ensued. After Mr. Blobby's first season of pre-taped skits, and with 15 million people watching every week aware of the joke, they couldn't use him for pranks anymore. But it was by far the most popular part of the show, got the majority of the fan mail, so Shakespearean actor Barry Killaby filled the foam rubber and remained on the show to spread disharmony whenever needed. Britain's children either loved him with all their hearts or were understandably petrified of him. By 1993, you could buy t-shirts, plushes, inflatables, bubble bath, pasta shapes, and so much more in the image of the blancmange beast. But like with Timmy Mallet before him, why not have him roll the airwaves too? Lego received a call from up-and-coming music mogul Simon Cowell about making that happen. I rather grandly said, we'd only consider doing a single with Mr. Blobby if it's going to be Christmas #1. He said, you're on. When the Blobby single was released, I think that's when people who didn't already hate me for creating Blobby filled the rest of my wax doll with pins. Released in November 1993, the single, titled Mr. Blobby, was a funhouse mirror reflection of a pop song, mixing together various elements from contemporary Eurohouse, Stock Aitken Waterman Productions, Vanilla Ice, and the farting synths of Mr. Blobby's own thrown together theme song. It also features a child choir, various tempo shifts, a late song key change, and lyrics that are either non sequiturs or ominously authoritarian. He doesn't even really sing on it. After getting to #1 for a single week, it was briefly usurped by British boy band Take That's Babe.
I'm back again. I'm back. I tell you I'm back again, babe.
Only to return to the top for 2 more weeks, including the week of December 25th. Take That's Gary Barlow has said on more than one occasion that this ruined his Christmas. When the two pop stars were reunited on Alan Carr's Chatty Man in December 2016, the seething resentment was still evident.
We are joined by the man who beat you to the Christmas #1
Oh, no.
all those years ago. Give it up for
Mr. Blobby!
In 1984, 7 years after the first house track got to number 1 in the UK charts, dance producers were rummaging through music history for a hook, something to make their tracks stand out amongst the other thumping, fall-to-the-floor beats. Enigma perhaps went too far back, over 1,000 years before the invention of recorded sound. While the banjo house of Cotton Eye Joe built off a traditional folk song from the 1860s.
Cotton Eye Joe, had not been for Cotton Eye Joe, I'd have been married a long time ago.
But two Dutch producers, Ferry Ridderhof and Peter Gunevski, sourced from the sounds of the 1920s for Doop. In the early 90s, the Netherlands club scene was divided between their homegrown, high-tempo, distorted, gabba, or hardcore house side.
Amsterdam, waar ligt het dan?
And the regular 130 BPM variety, which started being referred to as mellow house, clean, quaint, and old-fashioned in comparison. But wanting to write pop, watching how people moved to it sparked an idea in Ridderhof and Gunevski. What impressed us at the mellow house parties was the way people were dancing, with their hands kind of waving, like the Charleston was danced in the 1920s and 1930s. That was our main source of inspiration for Doop. Unlike with Sadness, where Enigma used a sample, the Doops recorded a trio of jazz performers playing through some ragtimer-like compositions, which they cut up and rearranged into several different versions of the track in their living room. Alongside the hooting, trilling sax and clarinet, they constructed their house foundation from clattering snare, forceful hardcore kicks, and claps. Its terminally catchy, onomatopoeic refrain was delivered by Ridderhof and sped up. Released as Doop by Doop, it quickly made the Netherlands pop chart and sold well throughout Europe. But in the UK, it went number 1 after a 25-label battle for distribution rights, won by City Beat. But because of its Charleston framework, it crossed over in a big way, a novelty that was beloved by club kids and their grandparents. Not only that, but in the 41 years of the chart up to that point, Doop was only the second ever eponymous UK number 1. The first, if you haven't been paying attention, was Mr. Blobby, 4 months prior. Tori Amos is in a genre 1. Because of her femaleness, she would often get compared to Kate Bush and Joni Mitchell by lazy journalists. But Amos's work delved deeper into more sensitive subjects than almost anyone else would dare. Complex, red raw examinations of sexuality, love and hate, while she played piano like Jimmy Page plays guitar, like a weapon. She was never destined for the pop charts, but in 1994 managed number 4 in the UK with Cornflake Girl, a buoyant song about the societal ways women betray each other. 2 years later, she released Boys for Pele, her most challenging listen, as if she's attempting to play 9 Inch Nails on a harpsichord. Professional Widow was the song to get the most critical attention on release. thrashing the harpsichord to within an inch of its life, drums cracking like a levee breaking. While the nearest thing to a chorus features a swear that Mr. Reznor would later claim for his own.
Don't forget, just like my daddy.
Amos has stated that the song is her Lady Macbeth moment, the song's protagonist seeing men have the power and respect she desires, and maybe wanting to go to similar lengths to make that happen.
It's gotta be big. I said, it better be big.
And though Amos has never confirmed, never fully refuted it, it is probably a song about Courtney Love.
Everywhere that you dash, as far as you can see.
But handed over for a remix to New York DJ Armand Van Helden. He was completely unaware of this background. He'd never heard the track and didn't know who Tori Amos was. But after being set up by an A&R at Atlantic, Amos reached out to him with one prerequisite: make it different. When it comes to remixing, I have one side. That's ass shaking. Now, does it move? I take remixing as a business, because that's what it comes down to. People don't want a remix that's, oh, it's so beautiful, but it doesn't move nobody. F that, it's all about sales. Taking inspiration from a recent trip to Club Capital Ibiza and the chopping to the melody sampling style of DJ MK, he created an epiphany.
Honey, bring it close to my lips. Honey, bring it close to my lips. Yeah. Honey, bring it close to my lips.
Very little of the original song is retained. Vocally, only 2 phrases, repeated ad infinitum.
Honey, bring it close to my lips. Yeah. Honey, bring it close to my. Honey, bring it close to my lips. Yeah. Honey, bring it close to my. It's gotta be big. I said. It's gotta be big. It's gotta be big. I said. It's gotta be big.
With the beautiful angel calling section transformed into a Cocteau Twinsian moment of clarity.
Beautiful angel. Beautiful angel.
That hard, funky bass line too is a snippet of the original track, sped up and made the song's core alongside a relentless post-house beat.
Oh, it's running a family. Hey.
It's very rare that dance music on the bleeding edge makes it to the top of the charts. This remix supposedly formative to the burgeoning speed garage movement. But for a week in January 1997, Britain wanted it big. Van Helden would return to UK #1 twice more. You Don't Know Me in 1999. And with Dizzy Rascal on Bonkers a decade after that.
Bonkers.
Amos would not. While Prodigy got to #1 while promoting arson, scaring children and leading tabloids to motion to ban this sick filth. There was another group that grabbed the top spot, who were perhaps even more controversial, warping the minds of the nation's youth as their 10-foot-tall leader outraged conservative thought leaders with their alleged use of queer iconography. It was, of course, the Teletubbies. Created by former teacher Anne Wood and kids TV writer Andrew Davenport, Teletubbies first appeared on British screens in March 1997. The look and movement of the 4 plush, brightly coloured beings, with antennas and stomach screens, Tinky Winky, Dipsy, Laa-Laa and Po, had been inspired by NASA spacesuits. I was fascinated by the moon landings. It struck me as funny that, at this pinnacle of human achievement, the figures that emerged in bulky spacesuits from landing capsules are like toddlers, with oversized heads and foreshortened legs, and they respond to the excitement of their new world by bouncing about. Their aim was to make a show for 2 to 3-year-olds that was entertainment as much as education, and focusing on how toddlers actually learn. The Tubbies' baby speak was thought to be dangerous to children's development, and though the constant again-agains may have been anathema to parents, studies have shown that talking their language and repetition is how to get themes and ideas to resonate in preschool. Within a couple of months, they were regularly getting 2 million viewers, though a significant portion of that audience were ravers, using the show's psychedelic visuals as a post-clubbing come-down. Like with Mr. Blobby before them, as the show was a hit and with a lucrative line of merchandising, it was inevitable that at some point they were going to assail the pop charts. And again, Simon Cowell helped with that. As 1997 drew to a close, they unveiled Teletubbies Say Eh-Oh.
Time for Teletubbies. Time for Teletubbies. Time for Teletubbies.
To say it's a song is perhaps overselling it. Merely the show's theme stretched to 3.5 minutes.
Say hello.
Padded by the Tubbies' various catchphrases atop a synth banjo bounce. Its bravado sequence is a fair light run of barnyard animal noises, played to their audible delight. But because of its target audience, toddlers, or more factually their parents, quality was never demanded. It entered the UK chart at number 1 in December 1997, stayed there for 2 weeks, sold 1 million copies, and was the betting favourite to score the prestigious Christmas number 1, only to be undone by Spice Girls. Too much.
Too much of something is bad enough. Bad enough.
Mr. Blobby and the Teletubbies weren't the only fictional characters grabbing number 1 hits in the 90s. In February 1991, 6 months after debuting on British satellite TV, The Simpsons rocketed to pop's peak position, with the more than likely Michael Jackson co-written Do the Bartman. Then, almost 8 years later, another cartoon sitcom, this one more foul-mouthed in its humour, would besiege the charts. South Park's Chef, with Chocolate Salty Balls, P.S. I Love You.
So suck on my balls.
South Park launched in the UK in July 1998, in a graveyard slot on Channel 4, under a hail of controversy and pearl clutching. Why are these 10-year-olds swearing so much? Why does the one in the coat keep dying? Why is the animation so crappy? Chef had been in the show since the first episode, him being one of the few people of colour living in South Park, a satire on the homogenous nature of rural Colorado. Written as an overweight soul-singing cafeteria worker, creators Matt Stone and Trey Parker were lucky to get their first choice to voice him, 70s soul legend Isaac Hayes. And if you got Hayes on your show, you gotta let him sing.
If you ever need a quick pick me up, just stick my balls in your mouth. Ooh.
Written by Parker, the song, or at least its chorus, debuted in the 1998 Season 2 episode, Chef's Chocolate Salty Balls, where the Sundance Film Festival moves to the show's small mountain town. And now overcrowded by film industry people, Chef attempts to cash in with his sweet and savoury treats, advertising them with a short, suggestive funk riff.
Suck on my chocolate salty balls. Put 'em in your mouth. Put 'em in your mouth and suck 'em and suck 'em.
By the Chef Aid album, released later that year, the song had been fleshed out into a soulful makeout jam / recipe, with production from Rick Rubin.
Mix in a cup of flour. You'll be in heaven soon.
Though not released as a single in the States, in the UK it was forced into the 1998 Christmas number 1 battle by Radio 1 DJ Chris Moyles, feeling that a song with such blatant sexual innuendo, doing to the Spice Girls goodbye, what Mr. Blobby had to take that would be very funny. And so he played Chocolate Salty Balls constantly on his drive time show.
Breathe up the cookie sheet. 'Cause I hate when my balls stick.
In the end, Spice Girls won out, but not for lack of trying. Chocolate Salty Balls was the highest selling number 2 single since Wham's Last Christmas went up against Band Aid in 1984. However, the week after Christmas, Chef would go number 1. What makes Chocolate Salty Balls more bizarre than Do the Bartman is that this is Isaac Hayes' only number 1 hit. This is the man that co-wrote Sam and Dave's Hold On I'm Coming.
Hold on, I'm coming.
and played keyboards on Otis Redding's Try a Little Tenderness. Whose solo work was formative to the soul, disco, and trip-hop genres.
I used you selfishly.
With the theme from Shaft, in 1972, he was the first black musician to win an Oscar.
Who's the black private dick that's a sex machine to all the chicks? You're damn right.
And a silly song from a cartoon, where it sounds like he's singing about his testicles, is his soul chart triumph.
Baby, you just burned my balls! Come on, my balls on fire!
I will dispense this advice now.
After becoming an indie film darling with 1992's Strictly Ballroom, Australian director Baz Luhrmann hit the mainstream in 1996 with Romeo plus Juliet, a kinetic collision of music video aesthetics and Shakespearean text. As a stopgap between that and 2001's Moulin Rouge, Luhrmann and his music supervisor Anton Monstead remixed a bunch of the music from his previous projects for a charity album. On the Romeo plus Juliet soundtrack, there was a choral version of Rosala's house classic, Everybody's Free to Feel Good, sung by Quindon Traver.
Brother and sister together we'll make it through. Brother and sister together we'll make it through.
Which they reshaped into a trip-hoppy ambient instrumental.
Brother and sister together we'll make it through.
At the same time, Monstead had received a chain email that was currently doing the rounds, a commencement speech given by Slaughterhouse-Five author Kurt Vonnegut at MIT in 1987.
Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 97.
It featured all kinds of hard-won life advice, from simply stretching, dancing, flossing, and singing.
Do one thing every day that scares you. Sing.
To not being so hard on oneself.
You are not as fat as you imagine.
It was tied together with the most basic but scientifically justified tidbit: to wear sunscreen.
If I could offer you only one tip for the future, sunscreen would be it.
Luhrmann felt that this, as a spoken word monologue, would work perfectly with their remix of Everybody's Free, but they needed to acquire the rights, and emailed Vonnegut's people. But as deadlines loomed, they hadn't heard back, so they searched the web for alternate ways to contact the author. What they found were articles about the sunscreen controversy. The list of guidance was never penned by Vonnegut, instead by Chicago Tribune writer Mary Smeek for a column in June 1997, titled Advice Like Youth, Probably Just Wasted on the Young, but it had been re-authored by the original sender to get more forwards. Smeek said of her initial spark, "One Friday morning in May 1997, I didn't have a clue what I was going to write about. As I walked to work from my home along Lake Michigan, I saw a young woman sunbathing, and I thought, I hope she's wearing sunscreen. I hadn't at her age, and I really regretted it. I had reached a point in my life where I was ready to give out advice."
Enjoy the power and beauty of your youth. Oh, never mind. You will not understand the power and beauty of your youth until they've faded.
Getting the okay from Smeek, the team employed Australian voice artist Lee Perry. Due to their prior misunderstanding, his delivery was supposed to evoke the Midwestern presence of Vonnegut, but also the self-assurance of JFK.
Sometimes you're ahead, sometimes you're behind. The race is long, and in the end, it's only with yourself.
With radio not thrilled about playing a 7-minute spoken word piece, Luhrmann gamed the system and got his track played on a radio art show in Australia in late 1997, and the switchboard lit up. It ended up ranking number 16 on Triple J's year-end Hottest 100. From then, it kept spreading.
But trust me on the sunscreen.
Finally released in the UK in May 1999, slightly altered to be year appropriate.
Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 99.
The main push for number 1 was, again, orchestrated by Chris Moyles. The line about one's parents bursting through his usual boisterous laddishness and motivating him to get the song heard.
Get to know your parents. You never know when they'll be gone for good.
Cliff Richard was the closest thing Britain had to Elvis, a hip-shaking voice of the youth, who, with backing band The Shadows, defined the earliest moments of British rock and roll.
Let me tell you, baby, it's called rock and roll.
After his first number one, Living Doll, in August 1959,
Myself a crying, talking, sleeping, walking, living doll.
he became a chart mainstay and scored number ones regularly, then intermittently, for the next 4 decades, despite ever-changing musical trends.
The young ones, darling, with the young ones. We're all going on a summer holiday. No more working for a congratulations and celebrations. It's so funny how we don't talk anymore. Christmas time, mistletoe and wine.
The Millennium Prayer from December 1989 was the 14th and last time his devoted fanbase launched him to the very top of the pops.
Every home, every tree.
While other rock and roll stars of his generation were taking heroic amounts of drugs and indulging in groupies, Richard found God, outing himself as Christian in 1966, an aspect that would increasingly impact his formerly secular music. The Millennium Prayer was the height of this, an incongruous mashup that is almost certainly the only number one to have both Scottish poet Robert Burns and Jesus Christ in its songwriting credits.
Our Father, who art in heaven.
If someone said to you there was the Lord's Prayer set to Auld Lang Syne, you'd want to puke.
Hallowed be thy name.
But when I heard it, I thought that the most simple ideas are strokes of genius when they work.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
And this to me is a stroke of genius.
On earth as in heaven.
It was Christian composer Paul Field that put the pieces into place, after seeing crowds recite the Lord's Prayer in sync with telecasts of Princess Diana's funeral. People knew the words. Why not put it to a melody they also knew? He included the piece in his Methodist review, Hopes and Dreams, and got Richard involved. Richard, though, heard a hit.
Lead us not to the time of trial.
Taking it to his label of 40 years, EMI, they couldn't hear the commercial appeal, and so refused to release it. Instead, he went with Chrysalis Records' offshoot, Papillion, and released it as a charity record for Children's Promise. BBC Radio's 1 and 2, as well as London's Capital, didn't want to play the song, both because the 59-year-old Cliff Richard was not relevant to their young audiences, and most importantly, the song wasn't very good.
Keep us from evil, for thine is the King.
But this resistance, this censorship, galvanized not only Richard's fanbase, but the Christian community, with the song getting played in churches, and parishioners buying the single in droves, helped by live airings at the Royal Variety Performance, and an audience with Cliff Richard. The Millennium Prayer spent 3 weeks at number one, only to be denied Christmas week by Westlife's I Have a Dream, the last number one of the 90s. However, Cliff Richard isn't who we think of when we think of music in the 90s. It was a time of musical innovation, massive movie soundtracks, boy bands, girl groups, and the music industry's naive belief that the numbers would forever keep going up. A decade of house, grunge, gangster rap, Britpop, and teen pop. At its most bizarre, it was a decade that reveled in controversy, kids' TV, and danceable beats. There are some recurring themes that play out in these songs. The move on to dance as the dominant chart music, the selling of pop via familiar fictional characters rather than quality, and increasingly ambitious sample sourcing. But more than anything, they all convinced the British public to buy, making them all, for a week or 3, the biggest song in the country. Thanks for watching. So what other bizarre 90s number ones do you think I missed? Comment down below. If you like this video, like, subscribe, and why don't you share it with a couple of people? It really does help. As always, I'd like to shout out this month's new top tier supporters over on Patreon, Andrew Waldrip and Fonzie Garrido, and thanks to everyone else that supports me. And I'll see you in a few weeks' time for a trip and a hop back to Bristol.